Hello, everyone. This is Guido. I'm with Savvy Code. I have the pleasure today of welcoming Mr. Nguyen from Vietnam. He is the founder of Logigear, which was acquired by a Japanese publicly listed company a few years ago. And I'm very happy to welcome him here today. Hi, Hong. How are you?
Hello, Hui, and hello, everyone.
So, Hong, yeah, you left your story is really interesting. It's like and a lot of us came to the US in 75, but you came essentially on your own. And as a person who graduated from high school, basically you're learning a second language entirely, and not as a young adolescent, but as an adult. Can you tell us how that was in your first few months landing in the US?
Yeah, so I think each of us would have a different story about our journey, but you know, for me, I was in Vietnam after 75, and I finished my high school then, and then I was there for a few years, but I got out in 81, 82 time frame as a boat refugee, and then I came to San Francisco in 1982, right? So landed there, and so language it was kind of interesting because my parents and my father was a diplomat, so we did travel, and I was in international school, when I was younger kids and kids and all of that. But believe it or not, when I grew up and I played a lot of music and I played rock and roll and all of that in high school. So I learned a lot of English beside, clinical studying in high school and all of that. I learned a lot of that just by singing, rock and roll music. And at the time, it was literally I didn't even understand all the words that I was singing, but just doing phonetically, and that's somehow helped. And but conversely, I was okay. I didn't really have a good American accent, but when I was in refugee camp, I was actually, considered as I have a little bit better English than a lot of others people. So I was actually teaching English to the refugees during the year that I was in the camp. Yeah,
Wow. So
but
which camp were you at?
we were in Galang camp in Indonesia, and I was there about a year, and then ended up in Singapore, and then to San Francisco, right? Yeah.
Do you remember your first day, when you first landed in San Francisco? How did you feel?
Uh, I think I remembered two first date, when they said before San Francisco, but when I landed into a refugee camp, and the guy was asking me, can you speak English? And I surely could, but I was so fearful that I said no,
Okay.
and and then the second experience was getting to San Francisco, and I think then I was a lot more comfortable. So going through immigration, and it wasn't a problem at all. But my experience in terms of trying to assimilate into the new environment, into the cultures and everything, and it always the most challenging things for me, as I remember, is talking about sports, and remember people's name. Those are the two most challenging tasks that especially like sitting in the bar and talking about sports with everyone, and it's just like baseball and basketball and football, and there was Google then to look up, see like what are they talking about, right? So
That's right.
yeah, but anyway, that was my first experience, but all of that, I got past, of course, yeah.
So how did you, I mean, I just can't imagine going to a country that you've never been to, speaking, a little of that local language, not knowing the culture, and then starting a life. So, I mean, how did you prepare for that? What did you do? I mean, did you find a job first, or you try to find, a local school, a college, a community college? What were your first steps?
I thought the first I was landed in San Francisco. It was in this apartment complex, and then there was this neighbor guy who was going on an interview for just like an assembly job, and I said that may I tag along, and so I tagged along with the guy, and then when he was done with the interview, and the interviewer said that, hey, what are you doing here? So I'm just tagging along. So like, hey, do you want to go through the interview? So okay, sure. I did submit for the job. I didn't apply for anything. So they were talking about job, and I talked about I just came here, and and then we're talking about like, okay, so what this job's all about. We were discussing it, and I said to the guy that, hey, if you have a job, and I'll do it, And to be honest, at the time I'm on welfare. I'm on welfare, so you probably pay me less than I'm collecting welfare, but I just want a job, right?
Right.
So then the guy came out and said, okay, if I give you a job, then how do you go to work? And I said that I'll go with this guy, the guy who came with me in interview. But he said that, but I don't hire that guy. I'm hiring you. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry about that. But anyway, so okay, I'll take a bus. So that's how I got my first job. I think it's just a few days after I landed in San Francisco, and so I was an assembly job with one of the telecommunication companies in Silicon Valley, and then I grew into a more technical position, and eventually I got a technical management job as a manager there. So after about 2-3 years or so, but then I left because like I need to pursue something more than just the hardware and just an assembly, basically assembly and managing assemblers and all of that. But that's how I got my first job. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so then you moved in from assembly work into what was your next move? Was it to go to community college, or was it more software related?
So I started going to community college, and I did total for me to get through my undergrad. I took about, because I did part-time, so I did about like 4 or 5 years in community college, and I got transferred into a little private polytechnic college in Silicon Valley called Cogswell College. And I spent the next 4 or 5 years, and the total is I think it's 8.5 years for me to graduate from school. And I remember that I actually co-authored a book on the software engineering and testing subject that published by Wiley, and the book was finished, but they had to wait it for a year for me to finish my school, so that with a degree, so that it has some credibility to it. So it was published in 1992, something like that. I was graduated in 1991 or something like that. Yeah.
So you wrote your first book within 10 years of arriving in the US.
Yes,
Wow.
and and I was co-authoring. I was so after that book, then I wrote by myself a couple of other books, but the first one I was co-authoring with Cam Kainer and Jack Phillips, and that's the time when I finished my hardware engineering job, and I started going to school, and I went into software, and that's how I started with electronic arts. At the time, it was like a small startup company that I was interviewing Trip Hawkins, and at the time EA had two different divisions. One is the game division, and one is the so-called desktop publishing. I'm sorry, that's desktop media division, and that was like the Amiga, the Mac, the Atari ST that we're trying to build notation, music notation software, sequencing software. This is before we came up with the term multimedia. And because my software and hardware training combining with my music background, so I was in the engineering part of the engineering team within the group to build this software. Yeah, that's how I got into software. Yeah.
So your first job, a software related job, was at Electronic Arts. At the time, they didn't have they weren't doing games, right? They were just
They were doing game. They were doing game, but at the time, EA had two divisions. A few years later, okay, they found out that there's more money in the game industry, and so they ended up shutting down the desktop media division. Yeah.
So
I moved on. Yeah.
Your first foray into software development testing, was that the writing the book, or was actually doing software testing at the at EA?
I was doing software testing at EA, and I was writing the book at the same time. Yeah.
So at the time, were there any books on software development testing, or was this like some of the very first?
Yeah, there was several. It's probably the one of the best one I like a lot is from Glenn Meyer. It's called The Art of Software Testing. Okay, which is really great. It's a combination of the engineering and the science aspect of testing, but also the philosophy behind that. That's probably one of the best books at that time. But the rest are really trying to apply the theory of hardware testing and engineering into software, which I strongly believe that it's really a completely wrong approach, because software, as we know, unlike hardware, we can change one bit and recompile and becoming something different. So the software is changes, not if, but it continues to change and it iterates. So the approach of testing software would be completely different. You have to do away with documentation, you have to do away with specification, you have to do away with requirements. Otherwise, when things change, you ended up spending too much time updating your spec and requirements when you ended up having no time to do the actual work. And that's the philosophy behind what we talked about in our early book called Testing Computer Software.
Did you incorporate these processes into Logigear when you launched it, in terms of like what was written in the books?
Yes. So in the early days, we actually, before it was really a consulting company that we were trying to help companies in Silicon Valley to set up a software testing team and setting up software testing labs. And we also put together programs to train people to become professional engineers, test engineer per se. And we actually have programs we taught out of UC Berkeley Extension Program, UC Santa Cruz, San Jose States, and all of that programs. And so we took quite a bit of sort of like bringing the professionalism and the arts and science of software testing to Silicon Valley per se. And that pretty much it's just before agile movement, before agility. And our philosophy is really about testing is about exploration, and you try something and then you learn from there and you continue to iterate until you're done. And that's a philosophy behind that. And pretty much a few years later, the whole agile movement, the philosophy is similar to that, but what they did a really good job is to codify how it would work. I'm more focusing on the testing aspect of that rather than the complete philosophy of development using that philosophy,
Wow.
Yeah.
So all the founders that I've interviewed on this show, this program, they all have a moment where they realize this is what they want to do. Either that, or they just kind of just naturally progress into this field of work where they started this company. Was yours more of a natural progression of your work, or was it like a light bulb moment? Say, well, there's all these companies and they need testing because the consumer use is going to be very important. So they may want to make sure that there's no kinks in the software. Was it one or the other, or was it something in between?
I think for me it's the combination, right? So I always have this kind of like life design concept, because I thought that at any moment you'll be thrown in the situation. Just an example of being in Vietnam after the war and going through the U.S. embargo, and it's a very difficult time, and then you come to the U.S. and then you get a new environment, and then you have economic downturn and all of that. So every time you have an event in your life or whatever situation, and I have this concept of a life design in which like where you are, and then what do you dream to do, right? But then with all things considered, like what is the possibility, and how much, what are the odds, and how much you're willing to take all these odds, and then choosing the path for yourself. And then after that, you just persevere to get it done, right? So for me, when I got to the US, and I kind of like it's a late bloomer, it's not by choice, but basically it's a late bloomer. I was in college, community college, part-time, when I was 25, 26 years old, right? And I was trying to learn English and trying to go to college and try to work at the same time. And I said to myself that even if I give up most of my life trying to go to school and trying to get, through the schooling path and getting a PhD or whatever, that's just so many people ahead of me, and they were there, and so that's just not my path. So that's number one. And number two is like I thought that I just for some reason I always have this entrepreneurism in me that I don't want to be working for somebody else, especially working for a big company. And I don't know if they want me either, right? So that's so I have to find something that it is something that different, okay, something different, that something that I'm kind of pioneer in, and I'm trying to learn, and something I'm being good at, even a subject that nobody cares about, who cares at the time? People think like, who cares about software testing? It's a whole bunch of monkeys sit on the keyboard and they punch things. They don't know what they're doing. And I beg the difference, right? So I thought there's something there that I can be good at. I can be a pioneer in it, and I can put something together, and I can make something of it, and I can contribute in that way. So that was by choice of doing that. I think what came into the large operation was that I got so many friends who were technical leaderships, VP of engineering, VP of software developments, and CEOs, and all of them. They said like, "Hey, Hong, you've been talking the talk, so why don't you walk the walk?" Right. So I decided to build an operation out of Silicon Valley, and we had like 200 engineers working for various company, in Silicon Valley. And at the time, I didn't even know what outsourcing was, right? So we're just providing, technical consulting, still helping people building labs, and then now we provide resources to do testing, remotely, as well as sometimes on site. Okay, so that's just became a business. I really think that it's a combination. Some of that is by choice, but things evolve over time as well.
Yeah, so I guess when you first started out, it was like you said, it was a consulting service. It wasn't really outsourcing. You actually had on-site engineers and software developers that came on site to help with the coding and identify issues. It wasn't what it is now, where it's much more systematic in terms of like
Yeah,
setting the software with all these end
yeah,
goals and testing it in certain stages and sections. So
yeah.
how did you find your first few employees or consultants to work for Logigear? This is in 1994, 95, right?
This is 93, 94.
1993,
Yeah,
94. Okay.
yeah. So I think you know at the time when I started off, you know, I wrote the book, I still working, and then I did some consulting, and over time I met up, you know, a few, you know, people, and a friend of mine, Michael Hackett, he's a co-founder of the company, so he was doing, you know, the similar thing, and he's also an artist, he's a painter and a very good painter. And I said to him that, hey, you know, I'm doing this, and why don't you come and join me and start this company and just doing part time, and then you just do your painting, and then you know you do the part time here, and then you know if things grow, then we grow with it. And he never got back to painting again, and he hated me for that. But we grew and grew and grew, and you know, didn't find time to paint. But that's how we started the business, and we connected a number of people in Silicon Valley, and then we just joined force. So at the beginning, you know, of the founding of the company, it's only about 20 of us that providing, you know, consulting and setting up labs, and we're flying all over the world, you know, Europe and US, and we just helped so many companies doing this, you know, and before it turned into a delivery, you know, production engineering for software testing, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, how did that come about? At what point did it transition from consulting to more of what you see today from software development testing?
I think that's just a few years before you know the .com, you know, getting really heating up, and I got a lot of demand, and a lot of my friends said that we needed to for you to just, you know, set up your own labs, and we need you to supply, you know, the people, and we send stuff to your lab, and you can do the work for us, and all of that. So that's how it started, and I think it did have to do with people realizing that, you know, we develop things we very quickly, but we don't have a way to test it, you know, quickly and get the, you know, quality product out the door, you know. So the demand is really high. So that's how I started setting up this operation and just purely doing services to primarily our customers customers were Silicon Valley, you know, but why we still have consulting customer all over the world, but primarily the engineering services that's just around, you know, Silicon Valley. That's how it started, you know.
So what was the first product you did to kind of put a system, a platform, a software testing platform into place at this lab that you just started out with?
So we just, I think, at the time, one of I actually went to work, you know, after EA. I also went to work for a US Robotic, you know, which is the company that, you know, Jeff Hawkins, you know, started, you know, and becoming Palm Computing, you know. So I did some work for them, and then we set up, you know, some lab and resources to do at the time, you know, Palm Computing was doing really well. So we a bulk of our work started, you know, with that business, and then it went on to do work for, you know, Apple, Claris, Oracle, Adobe, and all of that. It just went viral, and you know the customers kept coming, and so we're just basically setting up, you know, a lab in Foster City, okay, with devices, and then we have engineers working out of the lab, you know, and just that's how it's all started, you know.
Yeah, I remember those days. I mean, the Treo, the Handspring, the Palm, they were just like
Yeah,
the fad.
yes,
Everybody had to get one, particularly in Silicon Valley and California. And
yeah,
in some ways, I think that they were the prelude to the mobile device, the mobile phone, the smartphone that you have these today, right? It was
yeah. I think, yeah, I think at that time, everyone wanted to do it, you know. Apple had the Newton, and then there's the EO, and there's a AT&T. Everybody trying to build one, but it wasn't a mobile phone. It's
Right.
only a personal information management, okay, which is a device that has your calendar, your contact, and your notes, and that's it. There's no connectivity. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no connectivity. And oh my God, it just like selling like crazy. Okay. And then when we have cellular and all of that, so that it evolves into, you know, more like a mobile phone and device. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember it was like they started adding cameras into it, and then the phone component, the communication component got added, and I think that just replaced it. But I think the first iterations of having a mobile device held in your hand was probably the Handspring, the Palm, right?
Right.
Yeah, that must have been exciting to be part of that. To work with
very exciting. Yeah,
these
very exciting
pioneers.
time, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so do you remember there during those days? I remember it was super like crazy in terms of like traffic going down 101, and all these companies were just popping up, and the
Yes.
internet started coming alive. I think the internet was introduced in what late 80s or early 90s for the public
Yes.
to use, and
Yes.
email was mid 90s.
Yeah.
So all these technologies converging, you guys
Yeah.
must have been super busy.
We were super busy, and you know, because part of doing what we do is we need to understand, you know, how the internet and the operating system and all the graphical interface and you know, all the APIs being needed and how it interacts, you know, with one another, just in order to test it, right? So we understood how to do that, and we understood how to do that really well, you know, and especially if we want to try to, you know, automate the testing for regression as well. So we really know the stuff, and we were in demand, you know.
Yeah,
Not
so
until the .com demise.
that was what I was going to ask you. Is like I
Yeah.
remember that also. It was like a light switch. One day everything was going well, and next day they're saying all these
Yeah.
companies are crashing. You can't get it
Yeah.
listed, and investors are pulling out. So tell
Yeah.
us, do you remember that day? How that happened for Logigear and when it
Yeah, I think I remember that day very vividly, you know, and within only 1 week, we pretty much lost most of our customers. We went from over 200 people down to 18, back to our root. Okay, and just basically doing consulting. We lost mostly all the business, and so, you know, if you remember that time, you know, a lot of companies, you know, being shut down, and all of our clients, they had to shut us down, and they moved to work to India. Okay, so that's what's really happened. And even some of our key customers, you know, came to us, say like, we really love you guys, but we can't give you guys work. We need to fly you guys to India and China, and you need to teach people over there to do what you do.
Yeah.
So we did do that as well, by the way. So we did too. So now we went back to our consulting route, and then we went to, so we have people to fly to China and India and try to help them to do that, and we're trying to, you know, do what we can. At that time we pretty much lost, you know, everything. And you know, just to be clear, you know, I'm never a serial entrepreneur. I'm not the type of founders and get VC funded and then, you know, grow it fast or go home. That's just not it. So that's one camp, and then that's the small business camp, and then there's a private kind of technology business, and I'm more like a private self-funding technology business. So it's kind of like it's really an odd way to be in, but my concept is just like, you know, having control of the business and build the company to last. Yes, it's just different from, you know, grow fast, you know, or go home, you know, which is, it has its own path. So at that time it was difficult, because like so now I pretty much lost everything and went to rethink about how I'm going to do this, or will I be doing anything about this. But we went back, we regrouped, and we went back to our consulting, and that's how I started having some free time. I still do consulting with. That's how I came back to Vietnam and started revisiting Vietnam in around 2002, 2003, several times. Loved it. Yeah, the
Yeah,
first couple of trips. Yeah.
in a way, your consulting, starting out of consulting actually saved you in terms of the type of company you built, because if it was VC funded, I think there's, if once you get once you lose that revenue and that income and you're relying on VC funding, and you're not going to be resilient enough to go out and try to build your own revenue base, which you guys started as consultants. And so I think in a way that kind of built up the resiliency. And understanding that, hey, there's a way to make money without having to, build a product and then try to get as much customers as much as possible. So I actually think it kind of enabled you to survive the whole .com bubble.
Right.
So you were just mentioning about going back to Vietnam and looking at it and exploring around 2002, 2003. And that is a couple of years. I think U.S. and Vietnam had formalized diplomatic relations in '95. In 2000, President Clinton went back on his second term in November to basically try to encourage both sides to open up more. So you were one of the earlier believers in Vietnam then, because you came back in 2 years after that, 2002, 2003. So what was the state of Vietnam at the time when you got back?
So at the time I came back, I just came back, for the country, just come back to visit, the motherland. I wasn't thinking about doing any business in Vietnam. I've been away for 20 years, so I think that it's time for me to just come back and see the country, and hopefully it helped me to, reconcile and to heal. So I did that, just the first few trips, loved it, absolutely loved it. And then around the third trip, at that time, because of the downturn of the business, so we started initiated an R&D project that we built, a product called Test Architect, to help automate software testing. So we started building that in the U.S. at that time, right? Because we don't have any much of the service business. And then the third year when I came back to Vietnam, I was looking around to see if there's really there's a tech scene there, right? But before that, I was looking in China, looking in India, and looking in Hong Kong, because I was trying to outsource, some of the development of my product, to these countries. And then I was looking around in Vietnam, and I thought there is a lot of potential. There's really great engineers, very bright. The IT scene is really bright, vibrant, and most, if not all, of the engineers, bright engineers come out of colleges. They were born like way after 1975. They are part of the new generation. Smart, well educated, and I thought that, hey, there's something here. So I started looking around, and I built my first team in Vietnam of developers to help, my CTO Hans Buwata, to help him, build the product that he put together. So that's how we started. We started with a group of 10 engineers that just basically built our product in 2003.
And this is in Ho Chi Minh City?
It is in Ho Chi Minh City.
Okay. Yeah. Because I remember at the time, it was like, I left in 75, and the first time I came back was in 2000, 25 years later. And I was just totally surprised at the advancements, because your memories are kind of snapshot of what when you leave, how the country is, and you don't understand the progress that's made. And so coming back in 2000, you see that there's so much promise. There's so many people energetic, eager to engage and work and better themselves. So I'm sure that happened to you in 2002 and 3. With software outsourcing, I remember some friends, they went back in late 90s, and some of the earlier software outsourcing companies included, I think, Global Cybersoft and TSC. Do you remember those guys?
Yes, that's about the same. The Kevin and what's the guy, something. I forgot his name, but that's about the same era. And believe it or not, our first director of R&D that helped us build the product. Okay, he came back from France, studied from France, and then he had a few jobs before that. But he built a team for us. He's still with the company today, working out of Houston, Texas.
Wow, longevity. So so when you open it up in Vietnam, were the laws ready for you to open up a private company? How did you form a company in Vietnam?
So there were several steps. So when we built our first team there, we didn't know how it would play out. So we didn't have a legal entity there. So we sort of went in and we had a partner, and we had a kind of like a BOT type of arrangement. Okay, and so they are kind of like they have provide employee of records kind of services, and all of our staff use the facility and use their payroll, and all of that. But we operate and we manage these people. So that was step number one. Okay, and then when we decided to invest in building a big operation, in Vietnam, then we had to create a legal entity, and it will become like a wholly foreign-owned enterprise. Okay, so we have Logigear Vietnam, that would be wholly owned by Logigear, US. But there was a step even before that, because it took quite a bit of process and to get that done. So we decided to create a sister company that it's a Vietnam company, but with partnership with a Vietnamese American. Okay, that still were born with Vietnamese heritage. Okay, so they allow that type of people to have an ownership. So we built that company first. And I remember at that time it was, you're not allowed to have American name as a tech company if you are a Vietnam company, right? So we had to call it Logigear Test Research Center, that's LTRC. Then when we have the paperwork done for Logigear Vietnam, which is a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, by the Logigear US, then we roll everything over.
Yeah, I think those early years, it was people made it work with what they had in Vietnam. So what were the most challenging things opening up an international office? Because this is your first, outside the US operation, right? So everything was pretty much in the US, and then now this is your first step into a kind of a cross-border situation. What was it? The language? I mean, for you, it wasn't, because you speak fluent Vietnamese. So in terms of the engineering, was it really hard for them to work with foreign clients with English as the main business language?
So I think usually you have things in three buckets, right? You have sales and marketing issues, right? But luckily we decided that Vietnam will not be our market. Vietnam will only be our back office. So we spend money there. We don't make money there, right? So we didn't have to worry about that. So the only marketing we have to do is really for recruitment, right? So then the second bucket is F&A, because you have all of different regulations that you have to comply with, you have to reconcile, and then you have to do, roll up to the US, and all of that you have to be done. But then the part that you was mentioning about is like, how do you get the Vietnam engineers to be trained and work in a different, an environment, in different culture? That's a part that we spend a lot of times, and when we build a lot of programs, we build like our own university within the company, but not only teaching, test engineering, test automation, testing, but also we teach, English. We teach how to do business, with the West, how to do business with Americans. We teach, project management, and a lot of cultural things that we have to, cultural gap that we need to close, right? So it's really a very, very comprehensive program, that we put together, and interestingly, it's easier in the early days, because during that time, you have the setup that I would call like the factory model, where every 10 engineers, okay, they can be okay with English because they are not customer facing. You can just need one or two that lead the 10 people, then you'll be okay. Right. So the top, 2 person would lead the team because they would be customer facing. That completely changed when the whole agile, movement happened. Then there's no more factory model so now you have every engineer has to be, on top of communication. They have to be good with English. They have to do Scrum, stand-up meeting and all of that in the middle of the night. And so that will be even more challenging to create the team, with that type of talent. So it's always, I think for Vietnam specifically, comparing to India, for example, or the Philippines, or others, English is challenging, So we doing a lot of that even up to today. That all of those programs that's still running, 24/7.
This sounds similar to Intel's first few years entering in Vietnam in terms of having the big assembly plant. Was they felt that the skill set wasn't there yet, and they had their own training program. But the difference is that their training program was in the US. I think it was in Oregon, and they just flew engineers over there to train them and come back. They had the capacity to understand and to do well. It's just that they need the exposure, and I think that's what you provided them. So other than that, what were the main challenges at the time? And then from there, you grew internationally. So tell us a little bit more about those times when you faced some challenges in Vietnam, other than HR. Were there any? And then what were the next steps in terms of growing? I think you expanded in Japan and in Europe, right?
Yeah. So I think that Vietnam. I think it was challenging, but I think it's also rewarding in a way, because I'm basically, I decided to go there. I brought software testing to Vietnam before we decided to go to Vietnam. Software testing was sort of like being given away, so there's really no methodical way of doing in that, and there's really no industry, so we went there, and we brought a lot of training. We gave so much of our programs to most of the universities in Vietnam, and they teach software testing using our curriculums, right? And then we did a lot of marketing to research firms just to identify Vietnam as the next destination for software testing, and so on and so forth. So we brought that there, and I think one of the things that we knew this will happen is that we'll be a training engine, okay, for a lot of other companies, right? And so we know that's going to happen. So that's the hardest thing for us to keep on training, people fast enough and trying to retain them, but then at the same time understand that when you build the industry, that's going to happen, right? So we kind of accepting that model as well. So it's always our challenge, even up to today, is resources. Building good resources and trying to retain good resources and so on and so forth. And then there's another challenge. It has nothing to do with Vietnam, but if you remember that we have a financial crisis around 2008. 7 and 8, and I think it had an impact on the business. So we need to figure out at the time, we didn't have any layoffs, so we need to figure out how to pivot and go to a different market and so on and so forth. But we got through. So that's the Vietnam chapter. The other chapter was then we decided to expand. There was a couple of reasons. I needed to ramp up a revenue very quickly, and because of the COVID era, we couldn't really grow organically fast enough, right? And so I need to have a different strategy to grow. So I decided to create a international present. So that started with Japan, okay, and then we also addressed the UK. So we acquired a company in the UK. In Japan, we opened up our own operation in Japan. We acquired a company in the UK, and then we acquired actually another company in Vietnam as well, as a Salesforce.com company in Hollywood, Southern California. So within about 18 months, we had like 3 acquisitions after we set up the operation in Japan, and we decided to do that based on whether we need to have access to a new regional market. We need to expand our vertical domain. For example, if we don't have a SAP expertise, if we don't have Salesforce.com, we don't have Oracle, and we need to get that domain expertise, or if we need to expand the delivery, geography to a different location. So that's a number of factors that is, in place. And of course, like every other companies, we have to think about like build, buy, but for us, I at the time, I also had a decision that I need to figure out how to take the company to the next stage, and knowing that I would need to exit, right? So it's about build, buy, and be bought. That all of those 3 has to be in consideration. Yeah. But we never go now and say like, hey, buy us, right? And we just build it, and we'll be ready to exit, anytime, So we build that, operation in Japan and in UK and then other acquisition, and so that would have different type of challenges, because in Vietnam, in a way, it's challenging, but also we have an advantage that we are kind of the knowledgeable, who would come and provide the training and build the business. But when you do that in a different country with different expertise that you don't have, and you really you need other people expertise, and that's the integration in a way is more challenging, with the same set of marketing, positioning, sales integration, cross-selling, and F&A operation consolidations and delivery management, and all of that is become more challenging. But at the same time, it's also very rewarding if you make sure that you have a solid strategy in place to get it done.
Yeah, this conversation is so interesting. I didn't realize that we only have about 10 minutes left
Thank you.
before we get to the hour. So
Yeah.
We usually open it up, and there's a series of questions here that have come
Yeah.
through from the audience.
Great.
And one question is like, given the fact that it seems like you had two types of ways to grow abroad. One is you built your own, team. It sounds like in Japan, and then in the UK and in the other locations, you actually bought a team. So which way is, to you, looking back, is a better way for international growth?
I think acquiring a team is better.
Yeah.
It's better. If I beg your pardon, assuming that you need access to that market, okay? Because you might be acquiring for a different reason. Like if you buy a delivery center, that's different, right? Like you buy a South America delivery center. Okay, that's a different. You need, but if you need access to the market, it definitely buy is better than build, right?
Yeah, because there's a lot of due diligence, right? You have to make sure that what you're buying, you understand thoroughly, and you integrate that with into your business. And there's sometimes a cultural difference in terms of how one company does things as another. So does the size of the target matter then? I mean, if it's like a smaller company with a smaller team, I would assume the integration is easier. But if it's a larger team, it could be a very complicated, 2 or 3 year process to integrate a new company into the existing platform.
Yeah, certainly smaller size helps, but too small, it doesn't have an impact, right? So and I think that any post-merger integrations would be challenging, right? So I think that it's part of the program. I think we have to have a solid program on how we're going to do that, right? But at the end of the day, I just still think that buy is better than build in this context.
That's right. So how about the different time zones? How do you manage being, basically in 2, 3 of the 5, 6 continents, right? In Europe, in the US, in Asia, North Asia, and South Asia. Did you have like certain teams, or do you have designated office hours for management?
I think we are all now get used to having operations across to the different country, South Africa, India, and then Southeast Asia, and then Latin America and Eastern Europe. So you're just gonna have to make do. you find your calendar and you look at all the time zone, to make sure where can you align, the time when you have all this meeting. It's challenging, but I think that's a good and bad of where we are today. The good is we can work anywhere, anytime. Okay, but then the bad is we have to work anywhere, anytime. Well, what you gotta do? I love it. I love where we are, and the future of work, which is today, and all the technology that we have, at hand. It's just amazing, But it is challenging. But I think we just need to figure out how to manage it.
There's another question. It's like, is there a specific industry that Logigear is specialized in for software development testing?
So basically, we are more specialized in sort of like a business software, B2B type of software. Okay, but then with the IT kind of operation, we also have specialization in Oracle, JD Edwards, SAP, and Salesforce.com. So it's all okay. The ERP type of space, we have domain expertise in each. But on the software side, we just build cloud, blockchain, mobile, and pretty much the standard type of software that we build.
Yeah, I think you mentioned before that you also your company now has expertise in testing games. Is that right?
Yeah, we did. The game testing we've done this for quite a long time, already. But I think what we're really good at is really in automation. And what we do is what I call is like a large scale, test automation, because everyone tries to automate, but trying to make it to have a scalable automation program is very difficult, right? Because you ended up spending a lot of time maintaining the broken scripts, and how do you overcome that? And that's what we're really good at doing. Okay, that's if we talk about testing, then the automation, the DevOps environment, the continuous testing kind of environment is we're really good in that. That specific domain.
Yeah.
Those specific domain.
Here's another question: is like, do you think that Vietnam could develop a software testing industry to service the world?
I think
pioneer, I guess the question is.
I think it can be, and I think that's kind of that's kind of my next move. My next move is what I like is just to I want to build a supplemental training program, for computer science students, that after they get out of school or at the sophomore, as your junior or senior year, they can start getting this training, combining with project management, combining with preparing them, how to be a good test automation engineers, and then giving them career advice and then getting them ready. So that's what I wanted to start it, doing. That would be my next phase of kind of giving back and trying to help build the next generation of test engineers. And I think we have a much better chance in growing that than growing the number of developers. We really have good developers in Vietnam, but excellent developers pool with good English and with good other skills that needed, that is not a large pool. It is still limited. Okay, so the next tier, okay, which is, I think it fits best for software testing, and I think we can create a huge supply for the world to do this. And that's what I wanted to do next, just to help build that's back supply for Vietnam.
Yeah, and I think I'll end in terms of the Q&A session. This one question, and it leads into something that you're talking about. It's a person who is in Ohio, and they will be going to Hanoi very soon, and they asked, what are the challenges for an American citizen to do business in Vietnam? I think the challenges have changed, right? But now it's really open. So now, as a person doing business in Vietnam, as a U.S. citizen, do you see the challenges of doing business in Vietnam as a foreign citizen? And if so, what are they?
I think that the country is very open. Starting a business in Vietnam is not difficult, and especially you also have a very wide and strong supporting system nowadays. You have a lot of expats. Virtually any industry that you go into, you have a full network that can help supporting you to do that. And then there's a macro level of AmJam and everything, here as well. And there's a lot of, you have startup community, and then you have, the different type of, business community here. So you get a lot of support doing that. The challenge is just basically like anywhere else, you have to like, the place, you have to like the culture, and you have to be, willing to learn and assimilating into, the culture and working with the people, but I think it's a country is really open. It's a lot of opportunities. And I think that you get a lot of help here with the people who are here before you and still here and doing business here. So I think it would be okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm sure a lot of people joined today's webinar to find out and discover what instrument you play, because you are a professional musician. You have your own band.
Oh, I'm more like a weekend warrior, right? So, but I play guitar. So I play jazz guitar, and I also do vocals. So, oftentimes I play with the band. I could play trio or play duo, or sometimes I play by myself.
Yeah.
So I am my own band. It depends on
Do you play inside in Vietnam, or do you have a kind of like a regular gig somewhere in that?
So currently I don't have a regular gig because I've been traveling, so it's kind of hard to have a regular gig. But believe it or not, when we were in the middle of the pandemic, it was the New Year's Eve, 1921. I actually had a gig at one of the resorts in Phu Quoc, because of Fusion Resort. And that was we all in the middle of the pandemic. So yeah, so I do have off and on. I do have gigs here, and then when I'm back to San Francisco, sometime I get call from friends to do some gig with them. But I'm trying to get that more regularly. But I still have too many things that I want to do. So.
Well, I mean, I think there's the Hard Rock Cafe, right? They always have guest appearances. In the one in on Hai Bai Chun and Le Yun.
Yeah. We were there. We had our band in 2015 or something like that. My combo we will play there. We play there. Okay. We will play in Dalat. We will play in I think several Nha Trang and yeah. So we were there. We played there. We played the Opera House in Hanoi.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So you have to let us know when your next show is. So I'm sure all of us would want to come see. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
I want to thank the audience for joining us from different time zones in the U.S. as well as in it looks like in Asia and Vietnam as well. Thank you, and we'll see you guys next month when we interview the next founder. But before I end the program, I want to remind you guys that we do have this upcoming event in June, TechX. It's a extravaganza combining the creative minds in the tech world, film and music. You can go to TechX, TECX.savvycode.com. I know we'll be one of the speakers there as well. So hope to see you guys there in June. It's going to be at the Saigon South Marina Club. All right. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Hui, for having me, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah.